Hello and welcome to TomBecka.com, where everyone's exceptional and everyone has a story to tell. And this is a story of a generation. This is a story of a young man who at the age of 18 found out that he was going to be drafted and shipped overseas to fight in Vietnam. So instead of being drafted, he went and enlisted in the Marines and fought. Yes, this is the story of a generation. This is the story of a time in American history unlike any other time. A time of protest, a time of great cultural change in our society, a time when people really started to question the government and wonder why we were fighting a war in Vietnam. We were told it was to stop the spread of the evil communism and that we had to do it, and we did it for a number of years. And countless lives were lost. It was a difficult time in American history. And a time that, quite honestly, many people didn't talk about for a long, long time. It was a time that, if you knew a Vietnam vet, you might say something like, thank you for your service. You might say something like, well, that's interesting. Or you might call him a name and walk away. But very few people actually sat down and talked to a Vietnam vet to find out what was going through their mind, what was going through their head at the time they were doing what they were doing. Now, granted, every Vietnam vet story is different. But this is a story of a man that went and fought in the Marines. And after all this time, he's starting to talk about it. And he's talking about it here on TomBecka.com. Now, I've known you for a lot of years, more than I care to imagine. And yet, in the last year, maybe year and a half or so, you've talked an awful lot about your Vietnam experiences. Well, you never used to bring it up. You never used to talk about your time in Nam. Mm-hmm. And then lately, like the last year or so, it seems like it's more important to you. Is it?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. You know, when I came home from Vietnam in 1970, I just wanted to put it behind me. We've talked before about people's attitude towards the war back then. And I certainly had an attitude about the war back then, too, because I had been in Vietnam. And I saw that it wasn't the great war movie that I thought it was going to be when I got there. And so when I came home, people were not appreciative of us. In fact, they put me on an airplane and flew us into San Diego. And I had just come off the hospital ship. I believe it was called the Repose. At that time, a U.S. Navy hospital ship. And they flew us into San Diego. And before we got off the plane, these really nice ladies came on and said, put these clothes on. And we said, why should we put these clothes on? They said, just put these clothes on. And we were instructed to wear these clothes. They were very nondescript, blue golf jackets with T-shirts and tan pants. And we wore our regular, whatever shoes we had on. But then we found out later that it was so people wouldn't disrespect us as combat veterans when we walked through the airports and walked through the terminals where we were.
That's for real, huh? That really happened?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. And, you know, and I've heard the same story from other people, other Vietnam vets, where they would fly into Stockton, California, where Westpac, that was the home of Westpac. And they would fly into Westpac and they would give them clothes to wear when they got off the airplane.
Now, you see, because I always figured myself it'd be a thing where it's like, you know, one or two idiots do something, and so with those one or two idiots, you think about it, and it's like, okay, well, you're, whatever. But it was so prevalent that they actually went and made you change your clothes.
Yeah. They wanted us not to have troubles, you know. And I told you earlier that I was once in uniform, and this was after I came home from Vietnam. I was in uniform. It was in San Diego, and I was in an airport. I wasn't spit upon, but I was vilified, certainly vilified by people in the airport, you know, who give you dirty looks, you know, and would make these comments under their breath to you, you know, like baby killer and murderer, you know. And, yeah, well, fine, great.
Yeah, well, fine, great.
Yeah, well, fine, great.
Now, people can call you names, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's how you see yourself. Did you see yourself as a baby killer?
Oh,
did you see yourself? I mean, how did you see yourself coming back home from Vietnam?
I saw myself coming home as a Marine officer. As simple as that. Proud of what I did and would do it again. To this day, I'd go again. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about you going in the first place.
Okay.
Okay, so now, I mean, this is a whole different time for, people that are listening, that are kids. They don't understand what it was like. I was the first year where they didn't draft. I mean, I had to register for the draft, and they actually did the numbers and stuff, but when the time came, I didn't have to go. Yeah. So it was never really a choice for me. But as a young kid growing up, I was a paper boy. And I would read the headlines every day about Vietnam and the number of casualties and stuff like that. And I would see the protests and the rock songs and the discussion about Vietnam. And I wasn't sure what I would have done if I was drafted. Would I have run away to Canada? Would I have gone? Would I have, I honestly to this day don't know what I would have done had I had that decision. Now, you enlisted, right?
I did.
Why?
Basically, I came into the auditorium where I was going to school in Long Beach, college in Long Beach, and there were a row of recruiters at separate tables out in front of the theater department. And the Marines were the only ones that didn't have anybody at the table. And this old gunnery sergeant, hard as tacks, Gunny, you, get over here. Like, okay, what's going on? Here I am with long hair, and I probably had just smoked a joint in the parking lot, and I'm like, yeah. He's like, what's your name? I was like, oh, hey. And he went, oh, okay, yeah, I got you on my list right here. Like, yeah, what's that list? He goes, you're going to be drafted in the Marines. And I went, what? He said, yeah, they're drafting in the Marines because they can't fill the quota like they need to. So at this point, they're drafting you in the Marines. They're going to probably put you in here for 2 years. And they'll put you right into Vietnam, and you'll probably die. What?
That's what he said?
Yeah, basically. He said, yeah, you'll probably die. I was like, whoa, wait, let's talk about this. And so as we got to talk, he said, but, you now have an associate's degree. He said, and I can guarantee you placement in a program of your choice here in the Marine Corps, and you can go into the warrant officer program if you have the right skill set.
Now, were they actually drafting in the Marines?
Oh, yeah, you bet they were. Okay. Yeah,
he had on the list your name and said, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, we had draft numbers, and mine was my draft number was very prophetic because it was a Beatles song, number 9, number 9, number 9.
And so he knew you were going, and so it was like, hey, we can just take you, or you can come voluntarily.
Yeah, you can come voluntarily, and he said, what do you do? What kind of work do you do? And at the time, I was working in airports. I was filling up helicopters with gas and, hanging around, getting flights out over to Catalina with the pilots and, just jerking around with airplanes in general. So he said, well, we'll have you take a test. And you take a military placement test. And, of course, they show you things like, what is this? Well, it's obviously a skid off of a Bell 47G helicopter. Or what is this? Well, that's the tail rotor, or that's a Jesus nut on the main rotor assembly. So, and then they'd show you pictures of weapons. What is this? And like, oh, well, that's a Thompson submachine gun. You identify these things. And
so you knew all this stuff in college?
Oh, yeah, I knew all this stuff from growing up. We played Army when I was a kid. We watched Combat with Vic Morrow.
Yeah, but okay, I watched a lot of those shows too, and we played Army and had the little green Army men and all that stuff as a little kid. But I couldn't identify the rifles. I just bang, you were dead.
Well, see, that's my childhood growing up around people that were hunters and outdoorsmen and people. Remember, these guys had all been in World War II. So they're my uncles and my, older cousins and things like that. And they've been in World War II. So they made it plain to me, well, here's an M1 Garland rifle and here's an M30 Tanker's carbine. And, so yeah, I was very well versed in things. And after I took all these tests, they said, look, you're going to be assigned to the Warrant Officer Training Program after you graduate from boot camp. So every Marine, officer or not, still goes through the same training, basic boot camp. Mm-hmm. So for 9 weeks, you go to pure hell in San Diego. And then I went to Camp San Onofre in Camp Pendleton, BITS, Basic Infantry Training School, where you go and learn to, and at that point, they tell you, okay, your MOS or military occupational specialty will be this. Mm-hmm. And they came around and everybody was sitting there, and it was like the movie Full Metal Jacket. The DI's reading everything else. Becca, 3371, you're going to be a cook. And then he come to me, hailing 1112-A, Warrant Officer Training, Airborne Weapons Operations. Well, good luck to you. And I was like, great, weapons. Oh, yeah, well, airborne weapons operation. Oh, yeah.
So you really don't know. I mean, you just think this sounds cool. You're in basic training. You don't really know.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's 9 weeks of pure hell and then another 3 weeks of basic infantry. You're gung-ho, go get them Charger Marine, because they were training Marines to go to Vietnam, infantry, to go to Vietnam and fight, like they did. And you're in there, so you develop that mindset.
What was the mood like with the other soldiers? Because, again, the draft was going on, and the war was not necessarily all that popular back then. What was the mood with the other people in your basic training?
Oh, we all became Marines. We all became killers. We were all Marines. That's you don't differentiate. You become a Marine. That's what it's all about. Is they tear you apart and they build you up to be a Marine. And when you come out after 9 weeks, you look at a Marine recruit who's had graduation day. You're looking at a Marine that will not hesitate to do whatever he's told to do. As simple as that.
Okay, so now you're told to go to Vietnam.
Well, no, I was told then to go become a warrant officer. So I went to Quantico, Virginia, and I took a 13-week course there and became a warrant officer. And then I went to Cherry Point, North Carolina, and learned about helicopters and airborne weapons operations, M62 machine guns and M79s and 50 cals and Gatling guns and Puff, which is what my specialty was. It was a Gatling gun, basically, a rotating barrel, 8 barrels that rotated and fired up to 3,000 rounds a minute. So 7.62, it wasn't a 50 cal. It was a 7.62, which all NATO rounds, that's all the guns were the same caliber back during the Vietnam. So you could use, if one of your buddies in the Army dropped his rifle and you needed a weapon, you could pick it up and use your ammunition in it.
If I was talking about like any other piece of machinery, a car, a boat, any of it, would you have all those details the way that you just had with that equipment, that your gun and everything and your ammunition? In other words, are you a stickler for detail and all that stuff, or after all these years that stuff was just so ingrained in you that you can't forget it?
Oh, yeah, I'm a stickler for detail to a degree, but yeah, that stuff's ingrained in me, and you don't forget it. You never do. It's like little things, and when I see something, and my wife asked me, she said, what is the glowing bullets coming out of that weapon? I said, well, it's every 5th round is a tracer round, and Americans used red tracers, and the Vietnamese used green tracers. So you just know these little things like that. How do you make a tracer round? Well, they're dipped in phosphorus. What's Willie Peter? Now, these things still stick in my mind. What's Willie Peter was something I dreaded. I dreaded it more than anything in Vietnam. It was white phosphorus, because once it got on you, it burned, and it didn't burn until it was underwater. And then the way they would take it off of you, if you got it, was they would put your arm or leg in a tank of water, and they would turn the lights off, and they could see the white phosphorus underwater. And I was so scared of that, even though we had nothing to do with it. I was just whatever. Like, oh yeah.
Okay, let's talk to you again. You're a young kid. You're 18 years old, right? 18, 19 years old, right? You're a young kid.
I'm 20.
Okay, you're 20. Okay, you're 20 at the time. And as a 20-year-old, you're going to be drafted.
Yeah.
And now you're enlisted.
Yeah.
Again, around you, the other, 18, 19, 20-year-olds are thinking, what are we going to war for? This is the Woodstock era, things like that.
Yeah.
Was anything in your mind like that? Was there any self-doubt? Or did
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was part of that society, too. Just as much as I became part of the Marine Society, I was part of the hippie society. Mm-hmm. My goals were to go through college, find a nice job acting somewhere, maybe live in a commune, make love with as many women as I possibly could, smoke the best marijuana I could get my hands on, get myself a nice Volkswagen van, surf a little bit, learn to play the guitar. Yeah, I had, in fact, I had a roommate. You wanted to tell you about him. His name was Lee Waddell. And Lee got drafted at the same time I enlisted. And Lee said, I'm not going. And I said, what are you going to do? He said, well, I'm not going. And he said, I'm not going to run away, but I'm not going. And on the day that they swore him in, he had to go down to the draft center, and they give you an oath. And they say, raise your right hand. And Lee told me he came home that afternoon. And I was like, well, what happened? He goes, I had to go to jail for a couple hours. I went, well, tell me. So when they swore him in, Lee refused to raise his right hand and took a step back. And they said they swore everybody else in, but they gave him 5, 6, 7 chances. People at first were nice about it, but then they started berating him and yelling at him. Mm-hmm. And he still refused, and the FBI came in and arrested him and put him in a cell within their office for a few hours and let him go. And then he had to go to court. Maybe 6 months later, he wrote me that he had gone to court and that rather than to prosecute him and put him in jail, they were going to make him work at Value Village. And Value Village was a thrift store that was had a connection to the veterans somehow. And he had to go work at the thrift store for free. And he had to do that, basically for 18 months. So, he too served in his own way. But
he didn't go to Vietnam.
No, he didn't go.
So I guess you're living these two lives, basically, the hippie life, and at the same time, now you're the Marine and you're going to Vietnam.
Yeah, you bet.
Any way to describe what was going through your head? Like once you started, on that flight over there, any way to describe what you're thinking?
Oh, I was scared to death. You think about, you hear everything from all the old salts, the guys who have been there and come back, and they tell you, of course, the worst possible stories they can, and they affect a young person. They affect older people, too. You're hearing these stories, and you can't help but be scared, when you're going there. And you're like, oh, my God, I know I'm going to be in the air, but you think about the flying telephone poles, and that's what they called the air-to-ground missiles, Do you think about just so many things you think about that, oh, my God, this is really a dangerous situation I'm getting into. It came home to me when we landed. We landed in Saigon, and then we flew into Da Nang, which is the Marine distribution base. And when we got off the airplane in Saigon, we had to go from one part of the Saigon airport to another. We got on this bus, and the bus had chain link fence welded to the outside of the windows. And one of the guys said to the gunnery sergeant, who was the master of the bus, he said, "Hey, Gunny, what's these windows all plugged up for, so we don't jump off?" And he looked at him and said, "No, asshole, so nobody can throw a grenade in through the window." And that was really a sobering moment for me. I went, oh, my God, they throw hand grenades in the windows here. Oh, yeah. And then you knew why they had chain link fence welded to the outside of the bus on the windows. That's the kind of war that was.
Okay, so you're there and you're doing it.
I'm there. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm there. I get to Chu Lai. I'm in Chu Lai in the first day that I get there. There's no messing around. I get to Saigon, go to Da Nang, and then take another helicopter to Chu Lai. And I get there, and I'm out on the airfield, and it's just all these helicopters. And I took pictures. My first day, I have the pictures of me looking over the airfield, and I thought they were very artistic pictures at the time when I was framing them. I thought, but they were just a little brownie camera I had. And I'm taking pictures of these nonsensical placement of airplanes, DC-3s and CH-48 helicopters and a couple of Hueys, because the Cobras weren't in there yet. So the Cobras were just starting to transition in, the two-place helicopters, So I'm there immediately, and the next day, I'm in the air. There's no screwing around. I'm in the air the next day, so.
And you're there, and you're fighting. And now, how long were you in Nam?
I was in there 13 months. The Marines went for 13 months. Everybody else, the Army, Air Force, and Navy, Coast Guard, went for 12 months. The Marines went for 1 year and 1 month.
Just because they're Marines?
I never really had the answer to why they went for 1 year and 1 month. I always thought, just because we're badasses and we can do that, but...
Going back to the recruiting sergeant there that you had there, okay? Okay, so nobody else at the Marine table. The Marine guy looks at you and says, "Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, you're number 9.
Right.
Fine." I assume that's the same information that all the other recruiters had. I assume that the Navy and the Army and all of the same information. Do you ever think, well, okay, hear your offer. Let me hear what the other people have to offer?
No.
It was all just, I'm going to be a Marine.
No, I was sold from the moment. He said, "Hey, tell you what we can do for you, kid." And I was like, really? Really? Yeah, I was sold the moment he opened his mouth. Those guys, the recruiters used to take the Dale Carnegie sales course. And the reason the recruiters were out there was not doing their military duty. It was out there to catch guys that were dodging the draft, guys that, had not registered for the draft because they had the list right there. And they would sit out there, and it was also a recruitment tool, because they didn't recruit everybody on the spot.
Right.
But they certainly tried their best.
I know that after I got out of high school, and again, the war had just ended and they weren't drafting anymore, but I went to high school. And I went and I talked to a recruiter. Because, you're 18 years old trying to figure out what you're going to do.
Sure.
And so I figured, I don't think the war's over. Maybe I'll sign up now. And I talked to the guy and I said I wanted to be in radio. And the recruiter said, "Okay, you want to be in radio? You know what they're going to do? Yeah, you think you're going to get, you think you're going to get like Armed Forces radio? No, you won't get that." He says, "What they're going to do is they're going to put a big old antenna on your back and send you to the front of the line." Mm-hmm. And when I heard that, it was like, Yeah, you know what? I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I didn't hear the same, for what the lack of a better word here, the same romance that you seem to have had with becoming a Marine.
Well, you know, the Marine, becoming a Marine, there's some personal reasons there. My father, who was in the Navy, and my uncles, who are all Army, when I initially told them that I'm thinking about going in the Marines, their comment was not, way to go, good for you. Their comment was, you'd never make it. They'll eat you up and spit you out. You don't have what it takes to be a Marine.
Really?
And I was like, I guess we'll find out about that, won't we? You know, and I did. I loved rubbing it in their face. When I came home, before I went to Vietnam, as a 20-year-old warrant officer with those shiny bars on your collars and your dress blues, oh, Tom, I was, please get out, you know. And I loved rubbing it in their face, you know. And you could see it. Every one of them were kind of hangdog, like, oh, how are you doing?
Yeah.
By the end of the visit, everybody was like, you know, good for you. We're behind you 100%.
Okay, so now you're in Nam and you fought and you saw, you know, people die and you killed people too, right?
Yeah. Picked up tons of people. Picked up tons of bodies.
Both American and Vietnamese?
We didn't pick up the Vietnamese. South Vietnamese we did, but not the NVA. No, we left them out there. You know, and I was thinking about that in. You said we wanted to do this podcast, and I thought about it, and I thought about how we dehumanized the actual killing situation. We didn't refer to North Vietnamese as humans. They were dinks, they were gooks, they were slants, they were little black bunnies. They were everything except human beings. But everybody else was a human being. But we were fighting against this enemy that had no name other than NVA, Gook, Dink, you know, Charlie. You know, it was just the way you dehumanize the situation. And somehow it makes it palatable that you're killing someone. But on the other hand, it's palatable because if you don't kill them, they're going to kill you. And so that's bottom line. I was never in hand-to-hand combat. I was never like 50 yards away from somebody with a rifle. I came over villages with machine guns and blew the hell out of everything, including their livestock, their pigs, their water buffaloes, their bicycles, their huts. And was there residual damage? I'm absolutely sure there was. That weapon was nothing to mess around with. But that was our job, and we were clearing a way for everybody else to come in. Some of the pictures that I have that you've asked me a little while ago, why in the last year have I talked about it? And I didn't ever before. I put it aside, out of my mind, outside, out of mind. I had nothing to talk about to anybody because they wouldn't understand it. You know, when I first met you, would we have the relationship we have today if I'd have sat at the press club and said, all right, Tom, one time when I was in Chu Lai, you know, no.
Yeah.
No, there was no reason. It was years and years and years ago. My brother, when I came home, I had all these pictures of Vietnam and me in Vietnam and things I did. My brother had those pictures. I threw them away. I thought I threw them away years ago. My father retrieved them from the garbage can. When my father passed away, my brother had them. Well, in this marvelous electronic age we live in, he scanned them all into the computer, and about a year ago I got an email from my brother, which was unusual because we don't communicate a whole lot. And I opened the email, it had an attachment, and I opened it, and I was taken back 40 years in one click of a button because there were all the pictures. Everything from the day that I arrived, there I am in Da Nang on the runway taking pictures of indiscriminate airplanes. The next pictures are of the actual helicopter that I was going to fly in and the actual airplane. I started out in DC-3s. We were the last ones to have the DC-3 C-47s. They were still World War II airplanes that we were using in Vietnam at that time. And they were airborne weapons operations, and they were also stock carriers or supply carriers. But the next pictures I opened up were of a landing zone where I'd come in outside of Long Binh, and we landed, and we all came in mass. So it's like the movie Apocalypse Now. You know, there's 15, 20 helicopters coming in, right? Mm-hmm. And we come in first because we've got the weapons and we're peppering the hell out of everything. We're firing, setting up a perimeter. And we come in and we set down because we also have all the ammunition, extra ammunition on board. right in front of us, another helicopter sets down, and full of Marines, and it's an older Sikorsky, who I think it was called an H-64. Big, the pilot sat real high up with a bubble front in this one, and we were sitting there, and the dinks threw a mortar in, and it hit this helicopter, and just blew the hell out of it. Killed all these Marines, blew the hell out of it. And that particular one also had ammunition on it. And when it went, it had a bunch of RPGs, or rocket-propelled grenades, on it, which hit other helicopters. And so the pictures, the first picture is when we just landed. And everything's idyllic. You know, Marines are getting out of helicopters, the elephant grass is waving. And the next picture is about an hour after it all happened, after we were getting ready to leave. I said, I got to get a picture of this. And I took a picture of it, and you wouldn't believe it. It's carnage. It's carnage. It's just black. Everything in the idyllic pastoral scene in Vietnam is now looks like Dante's Inferno, and it's just, you know, pure hell, you know. So I looked at those pictures and I went, oh my God, I did this. And then I started looking at other pictures where I remember one day we had a record body count. We went out and we pulled in an army platoon that had got massacred. I think we had 30 bodies that day, and we stacked them like cordwood in a helicopter, and we flew back to the base, and then the army detail would come out and unload them. You know, the funeral detail would come out with their metal coffins and put them in there, and they would take them into hangars. And in this picture, it's me and another guy, and we've got these big black bags, something's heavy in them, obviously. Yeah, it's just body parts that we hoped that it was the same person, then put into a bag and carried off, you know. The pictures brought it all home. Then the final picture that put me over the edge was a Christmas Day of 1969, Christmas Day. Or it was 1970. I don't recall which. It's everybody in my air wing standing outside their tents. Everybody. We're all there. Me, them, and I look at myself, and I'm so young. You know, I'm so young in that picture. But everybody else was so young in that picture, too. You know, and I can look at some of them and remember their names. And a guy named Corporal Kiger from Ohio. I don't know why I remember him, but he used to run down the flight line. He had been an actor in college. And he just had done Oklahoma. He said the last show he did was Oklahoma. And there's a great scene where all the cowboys ride in on horses, but they're not riding. They're just bow-legged and kind of doing a dance. Yeah. Well, he would run up and down the flight line with his imaginary horse. Whoa, Tiger, whoa! And he would kick the side of a helicopter. I'm sorry, but that horse got away from me. He was so funny, you know. And little things like that is what you remember most of all. So when I got those pictures, it all opened up. The wound, if you will. I don't know if it's a wound or not. I've been going to the Veterans Hospital for some medical care, which is a very good place to go if you're a veteran. Do not hesitate to go there and get enrolled in the program. They take care of you. They take care of you 100%. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. No one's going to ask you who your insurance company is. They're going to take care of whatever problems you got, physical or mental. Mm-hmm. But I'm part of this program that is for Agent Orange people like me who've been exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam. And in that program, I started it in California in 2006 with 100 people in the program. I didn't know the 100 people. I was just one of a group of 100. Right. Now, here in 2013, there's 4 of us left in that program. The other ones have all died. You know, so, and I'm really the youngest one in the program at 62. The older guys, you know, some of the guys were in their 70s. So you can put that and say, well, they died because of their age and other things. Right, but yeah. It's kind of freaky. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make is when I was at the vets, they said, we want to do some testing. And they did some psychological testing. And they said, you've got PTSD, which I was amazed. I said, no. I said, no, you have it. You have it. You definitely have it. Well, maybe I do. I don't know. Maybe I've had it a long time, or maybe it came about because of the pictures. I don't know. But the reason I want to talk about it more is because it's important to talk about it, and perhaps someone will learn something from this conversation. They'll either learn how to protect themselves in the same situation, or they'll learn how not to get in that situation.
Let's talk about this a little bit, because this past Christmas, I was up in Minneapolis, and we were on the train going from downtown out to where our hotel. And on the subway there, whatever, there was a Vietnam vet. It was Christmas time. And he was sitting there in the back. In his mind, he was still fighting the war. Mm-hmm. And he was just saying to nobody in particular, you know, there's no snow in the jungle. And talking about it. He was making a gun sign. He showed his dog tags. He asked me if I had served and stuff. I mean, it was in his mind, he was still fighting the war.
Yeah.
Okay. And there have been stories of, the number of homeless vets, from Vietnam and other homeless vets. It's tragic what some of these people, they come home and they can't assimilate back into society. On the other hand, you've had a pretty good life.
Yeah.
You got 2 great kids, a lovely wife. You've had a pretty good life.
Yeah.
Why do you think you were able to come back and be able to live this good life, even if you are dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, been able to put it behind you? Why do you think you were able to do this and other soldiers were never able to move on?
Because I took it off like a bad coat. I did. When I came home, I took it off, laid it down, and I didn't dwell on it anymore. And I think that's the bottom line. It was over. I was home, and I was going to make the best of being home. I wasn't going to live there no more. And I saw that for so many other Marines. The guys had been twice to Vietnam. They weren't like us. They weren't like us. They'd come in. In my first tour, these guys had come back, and they'd already done a tour. And as soon as they arrived, we realized one of these things is not like the other. And that was them. And I said, I'm not. No. Look at Bob Carey. Bob Carey, Medal of Honor winner, lost a leg. I mean, if anybody's got something to be bitter about, Bob's got something to be bitter about. Did he waste his life? I don't think so. No.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I find that interesting, though. Yeah. Evidently, we all react to big life events differently, and we all handle trauma differently. But I always found that interesting, where people like you, friends that I knew that went to Nam, how they were able to have good lives, and other people just could never get beyond it, and were always still living there, and had left their minds back in Da Nang.
During the early 70s, actually it was the mid-70s, when I first came to Nebraska, I got associated with the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Board. And Bob Carey was a member. Jim Davis at one point was a member. James Martin Davis was a member. There were some other guys that were members, too, quite prominent in society now. But our job was to sit there and make sure that the health care and financial care was distributed equitably to veterans who applied for it. And one of the things that used to just rail me were the guys who came in and said, I need money because I was in Vietnam, and that's why I beat my wife, and that's why I had sex with my stepdaughter. Well, wait, we were all in Vietnam, and we didn't beat our wife, and we didn't have sex with our stepdaughter. Maybe the ramifications of their PTSD or their time in Vietnam caused them to do that, but we were we were not very understanding about that kind of stuff. We always thought, we managed to go ahead with life. Why can't they? We didn't ever interfered in our decision to give money or to give, whatever to somebody. But, it was one thing that always tore me up. And, another thing that used to tear me up was guys who would wear their badge proudly of Vietnam. Like they would walk around with Purple Hearts on their coats, and they would have Purple Heart license plates. You go to the Veterans Hospital, you'll see them there every day. Guys who are still in the military, in their mind. They're like the guy you said you saw. Mm-hmm. These guys are still there in their mind. They're wearing all their ribbons. They're wearing these coats, and they're let it go. Let it go. Yeah,
because you never joined the VFW or American Legion or anything like that, did you?
No, never had I joined the Fleet Marine Force for a while, which was retired and discharged Marines, but it wasn't my cup of tea. I've never been a joiner for civic organizations like that, and it just wasn't. I could barely. Once I had an employer who told me the only way you're going to keep working here is become a Mason. I went, okay, so I became a Mason, but after I left, I didn't continue being a Mason because I wasn't a joiner. It wasn't something that I looked forward to doing.
Were you not a joiner prior to going to Vietnam, or was this something that you maybe became different after you had spent that time overseas?
Yeah, I became different after I came home from Vietnam, definitely. I definitely became different. When I first came home from Vietnam, I slept on the roof of my parents' house for 3 months. I wouldn't sleep on the ground. I wouldn't sleep inside, I was so used to sleeping inside my helicopter that I wouldn't sleep, in normal situations. So, yeah, it changed me, but I was never, as a kid, much of a joiner. I was not involved with it in school. I wasn't in choir or band or a lot of those things that everybody else was in. I was kind of the independent thinker.
Let's talk a little bit about you on the roof. I'm guessing from what I know about you, there was more than one reason why you were sleeping on the roof. You've got a thing against snakes. You've got the snakes in Vietnam have a lot to do with you, don't they?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. The best snake story I can tell you, we were assigned to fly persimmon bushes from right outside Da Nang in the hills. These Montagnard tribesmen use persimmon in their daily tribal. The Army made a deal with them. We'll move you off of this hilltop, because we want this hilltop for a forward observation post. And the Montagnard said, sure, great, and they got water buffalo and who knows what else. But our job as the Marines guys, it fell on us to help move everything. So we were in this big helicopter, CH-48, twin rotor, turbine drive. It got a rear ramp that opens up. And we had the whole thing stacked with persimmon bushes, in 50-gallon drum, or in 5-gallon drums, basically, like paint buckets. And I'm in the rear operating since we weren't on a weapons mission, we had weapons and ammunition, but my job was to operate the ramp, basically, at that point. So I'm standing in the back, and, I'm in a flight suit, got my uniform on and headphones, and we're flying along about 10,000 foot, and the headphone comes alive, and I hear this, snake! And I look up into the cockpit, and I go, what? And the co-pilot's going, snake, and he grabs his gun like this and he starts firing. I think, this guy's lost his mind. He's gone over the edge. Yeah, this is it. He's going to kill me. He's going to kill me for what? I don't know. Why is he calling me a snake? And I'm fumbling around looking for something to throw because I don't have a sidearm at the point. Uh-huh. And I look in front of me and there's this brown cobra, and he's probably 6-7 foot long, wrapped around this bush, but he's up above the bush and his hood is spread, and he's just swaying back and forth in front of me. I mean, literally, he's a foot away from my face, And I'm looking at this snake, and the co-pilot comes back on and he goes, get out of the way. And he's firing, trying to hit this snake, but I realize the ramp is closed, and he's hitting. There's where all the hydraulics are back there, So I got this chain or this keypad, basically on a big heavy wire chained, and I hit the ramp, and the ramp opens up, and none of these things are wired down, and the pilot puts the helicopter nose high, and all the stuff starts sliding out. And I mean, that snake just went right by my face, I remember to this day looking at the back of the helicopter and seeing all the persimmon bushes flying down. But out in the middle of the air is this snake, and he's crawling in the air like this, going forward. And I was like, oh, man, after that, we had, in our duty huts, we'd put our huts, that's a misnomer. In Chulai, the huts were basically tents, and we would dig out the foundation maybe 4 or 5 foot deep and put the tents up over them. So you had this kind of a deluxe, setting there. And then we'd get, I can't, my mind is blank, what you call them, the pallets. We'd take pallets and we'd build floors with pallets. So we're sitting on the rack one day and we're smoking dope and drinking, and I look down and there's this snake going underneath the pallets, and it's 3-pallet snake. This thing is 3 pallets full of snake, and of course now I'm in control now. So I got my little shovel that I had there and started chopping the snake to pieces. And after that, snakes had a lot to do with me sleeping on the roof.
You mentioned smoking dope.
Yeah.
How prevalent was that? And
gee.
Well, I've heard the stories, but. Did the commanders know? Did the people in charge know, and they just didn't care?
Everybody knew. Everybody.
They didn't care.
What are you going to do?
If smoking dope helped you get through Nam, that was fine with them.
What are you going to do? We had the drinkers and we had the drug users. You had, as long as you weren't popping heroin, you can get away with just about anything. But when you started doing heroin, that's when you came up on the radar screen. But we used to buy OJs when we'd go into Saigon.
OJs.
Opium rolled joints. They'd take joints and they'd dip them in liquid opium. And we'd buy these OJs, like $5 would get you like 4 or 5 of these big, long cigar-like joints. And you'd take them back. You couldn't smoke one of them. You'd be passed out. You didn't even know your name. They were so good that it was the best dope I've ever had. I've never had dope. They say nowadays, marijuana is 10 times better than it was. Well, I don't know about that, because the dope we had in Vietnam was so good you couldn't even remember how to walk. It was that good. But, we smoked and we drank and,
Okay. We're getting towards the end here. What was the best part of being in Vietnam? And what was the worst part about being in Vietnam?
Best part of Vietnam was flying over Vietnam on a sunrise or sunset mission, when you had that magic hour, when everything was, the sky wasn't blue, it was kind of a teal blue, and with hints of black and gray on the edges as it started to get darker, or started to get lighter. And the sun, and the positioning of the sun, and how it turned into an orange globe instead of a yellow burning orb in the sky. And the beauty of Vietnam was uncompromising. You could get lost in the beauty of it. Once you saw from the air what it was, you couldn't imagine. You know, unlike America, when I've flown in America, the fields are square miles, you know. In Vietnam, the fields weren't square miles. They were whatever they had to do to make it around a group of trees or a rock or whatever. So they might be shaped like dog legs or cat heads, who knows? But you could see these fields, you know, that these people had tended for years. That was the great stuff, flying, just flying and enjoying that. The worst stuff was never knowing who was going to die next. And you never thought so much about yourself. You couldn't get into that mode of saying, oh, I'm going to die any moment. You couldn't do that. It would kill you. You might as well just shoot yourself, because then you were totally useless. But not knowing who was going to die next, and always waiting for that other shoe to drop when that one helicopter wouldn't come back, or that helicopter would come back with damage, and you'd say, well, what about Williams? What about Corporal Geiger? Corporal Geiger, he was my favorite, but when they brought him back, there was the top half of Corporal Geiger, and then there was the bottom half of him. And I was there, and I took the bottom half, and I could only remember him running up and down the line with that stupid imaginary horse. Excuse me a minute. That was the worst part, you know, not knowing who was next. You know, and then when you left, it was even worse, because you felt, when you went home, you didn't feel like you were going home. You felt like you were leaving. You felt like you were escaping, like you were running away, like you should have stayed. But I did my time. I couldn't stay anymore. You know, I was wounded. I didn't get wounded like a lot of guys' lucky asses got wounded in 2 months. I got wounded in the 13th month. You know, so I was medevaced out to a hospital ship in Cameron Bay, and then from there I was taken into Honolulu, and Honolulu to San Diego, you know, so.
I don't know. You were wounded in Nam? I didn't know.
Yeah, I was. We came into a landing zone, and the Army and the Marine Infantry both used to establish landing zones when we'd have to do a medevac, and one of the ways they'd establish it is a perimeter of men with weapons. But they would also take a thing called a claymore mine. And it's about the size of your Apple laptop there. And it's curved, like, kind of like a quarter circle. And the front of it is full of BBs. And the BBs are ball bearings. They're about the size of your thumbnail. And they're electronically fired. They have C4 or explosives on the back. And you would put these claymores out with the round shield facing the enemy. In fact, they said right on it, this side towards enemy. And we went into an LZ that had been established, and we went in early in the morning, and during the night, sappers, or Vietnamese, had come in and turned some of the claymores around. So when we came in, we were getting fire, and some of in the Army decided they were going to be helpful and fire off the claymores and clear the area. But just as we touched down, they fired them off, and they came into us and killed our co-pilot and wounded me, and killed another guy that was outside. I didn't know who he was. He was an Army guy. He was a field Army guy. He would, give us signals where to land and stuff. We killed him, and I got it. I got it in the ass, and I got it in the head. So I've got a nice scar that goes all the way across the top of my butt cheek, and I got another one in my leg right above my right knee, and then I got here on the forehead. So,
but again, no real regrets.
Oh, none at all. None at all. God, Tom, I was 21 years old. I was full of piss and vinegar. I ruled the world. I was flying, for that time in our history, I was flying state-of-the-art equipment, on state-of-the-art equipment. I was I was smoking the best dope. I was making love to the most beautiful Vietnamese women I could possibly find for hardly no money at all. And we had all the comforts of home in many ways. You know, we really did. We had Coca-Cola in glass bottles. How the hell can you go wrong? You know, life is good if you have Coca-Cola in glass bottles.
What do you think the biggest misconception, of people that are younger generations that don't know, they weren't alive during that time, they look at you now, and what are the misconceptions about a Vietnam vet?
Oh, that we're crazy, and because we're not. You know, some of us are crazier than other ones, but we're not all crazy. Not all of us have the debilitating PTSD that I've always thought PTSD was like debilitating. Like, oh my God, the guy sits in a dark room and looks out the curtains once a day. But it's not that at all. I found out, and that we were the castaway war. We were the ones that were cast away. We were not honored. We were vilified, and we were basically no one. I know no one in my generation in the mid-'70s and early '80s that went out of their way to talk about Vietnam with people because it really wasn't popular. I do give Richard Nixon kudos. He said he would stop the war, and he did. You know, and it was not a war. It was a police action. You have to remember how it started. It started with the Dutch. It didn't start with the Americans. It started with the Dutch, and then the Dutch couldn't handle it because they were trying to protect their tin and rubber reserves, and the French came in and said, well, we'll take over and we'll protect the tin. Well, they couldn't do it, so they called in the Americans as advisors, and then all of a sudden it went from being advisors to a full-fledged war under Lyndon Baines Johnson. He escalated the war, and Kennedy wanted to end the war, but Baines Johnson, he escalated it, and then Nixon, he finally put it into it. He said, that's it. No, it's going to end. So you have to give him that. You know, whatever else he was in history, he was responsible for ending that war. So I guess just remember that we're humans, and if somebody's father or grandfather or uncle doesn't want to talk about Vietnam, don't push the button. There's nothing to hear. You really want to watch, you want to see what it was like, watch a movie, okay? Watch Apocalypse Now. Watch Full Metal Jacket. Watch The Boys in Company C. You see it all.
Last question. Because, I know that you got a big love of theater and film and everything.
Right, yeah.
What movie about Vietnam is the most realistic movie about Vietnam?
Well, Boot Camp is Full Metal Jacket. That is Boot Camp, 100%. I would probably think The Boys in Company C is pretty close to what it was like. It shows the idiocy of war, where people are pulled out of the field to go play soccer games, Yeah, that's a pretty good movie. But, in war movies, there's so many good war movies, and I think our favorite, I think it's called My Favorite Year, and it's about a group of 4 vets that come home from World War II, and it follows them guys after World War II. It's an old black and white movie. Frederick March is in it, and you watch that movie, and you'll see what it's like to come home.
Was it My Favorite Year? Wasn't that the movie of about your show of shows, the one that Neil Simon did? Wasn't that My Favorite Year?
Yeah, man, I don't know the name of it. I have to look at it.
Maybe,
but yeah, look it up. Just ask anybody about it, and they'll be able to tell you about it. But I just don't dwell a lot on it anymore. But in the last year, I've dwelled more upon it. And it's funny because I could get rid of those pictures with one keystroke, but I keep them. Why? In fact, my screenshot on my computer is me hanging out the door of a helicopter, firing away. And you can look at it, and you can see these little yellow things. Those are shells firing off in the air. And everything came back to me, that shot. It was taken by Corporal Kiger. And he was in the helicopter next to us. And I was drilling a bunch of people on the ground, or a bunch of things on the ground at the time. And he took this picture of me. But what really came back is, on that, I was crossing over to Huey's about that time. And on the Huey's, there was a bar that came out right outside the open door of the helicopter. And that bar was where you hooked on the wire with a wheel for the winch to winch things up to the helicopter. But I'm tall, and it was a situation where every time I leaned out the door, bam, I would hit my helmet on that thing. And you'd look at my helmet, and it's all scratched and gouged in the front right here. But then if you look at the arm, it's got adhesive tape taped down around it. It all came back. And a really telling thing in that picture, they gave us these bulletproof vests. They're called King Arthurs. And they were green vests that you put ceramic plates in, and they're very heavy, very uncomfortable, and they were hot. So hardly anybody wore them. So if you look at this picture, my King Arthur is under my knee. I'm kneeling on it to get a better shot with this machine gun out this door, But I look at that picture, and it's my screensaver, and I thought I should change that because every time I look at it, I start going back, and I really don't want to go back. And so it stays there for now, but it's a really telling picture. You can see that and go, wow, it's all there in black and white. That's Vietnam. In one picture, that's Vietnam.
And that's one man's story about his time in Vietnam. One thing we did learn from Vietnam is after that, no matter what, anytime our military forces got into action, we never treated the troops badly again. Even if you disagreed with the war, even if you weren't quite sure why we were doing what we were doing, you never blamed the military men and women that were serving. And to all the military men and women that have served this great country over the years, thank you very much for your service. And be safe, be well. Join me again. Every Sunday we have a different podcast here, a different person, somebody with a different story, a unique story, maybe a story that you can relate to or a story of something you never thought was possible. It's all here. Tell your friends, spread the word, and then join us each and every week on TomBecka.com.